Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. So, this is Survey, Part 2, Station, Chapter 9, Jack. Days and weeks passed after I received the news about Hans. I slowly returned to something like normal. It was hard to be really excited when we got the boots on the ground signal from the pre-call team, but I was able to have a beer with my adopted ensigns in the mess hall that night to celebrate the pre-call team leaving the scaper. While part of my mind was still on the lookout for problems, my grief overshadowed everything. Marcia wasn't pushing me to talk about Hans during our sessions, at least not yet. Instead, I was learning a lot about working with spirits from her. We talked about different deities and what other people think of as ghosts. I found it fascinating, but I was still a bit skeptical that it was something I could do, or that it was even real. I asked her about it in one session. How do I even know what I'm hearing isn't just something I'm making up? Marcia thought for a bit, then smiled. You don't. You just know, said a voice in my head at the same time. Seriously? I asked both of them. Listen, I know you're a skeptic, and really I think that's perfectly fine. In fact, I think you should stay that way. When you're working with spirits, especially those we think of as deities, it's always your personality plus the spirit. The only way they know how to communicate is by using your head like a dictionary. If you're always able to question what a spirit is asking of you, you won't fall into their traps and always pass their tests. If you're able to question them, you can also negotiate your relationship with them, or even ask them to help you with certain things. Tests? Last thing I needed was some spirit throwing tests at me. I'd been tested enough. Some spirits will test your worthiness or your ability to use your own morals in dealing with them. Sometimes it's just finding offerings for them, or setting aside a small shrine for them. Sometimes they'll tell you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. Those are the harder ones because sometimes it seems perfectly reasonable, but sometimes they threaten to leave you or ruin your life if you don't do what they ask. What they're really testing is if you actually tell them no. A lot of spirits, especially deities, don't like sheep. I laughed. Fat chance of that with me. I've already had my reality turned upside down once. I don't need it done again. Marcia smiled. Good, she said. This is one area I don't really worry about for you. Although I hope that they don't go too hard on you now that you're talking to them. You've already faced death once. You don't need to do it again. Jack looked at Marcia. Does she know about the voice that's talking to me? I wouldn't be surprised if she did. You know, right? I said out loud, that a spirit's been talking to me. Really? The older woman said with that smile, then looked at her wristcom. I think that's enough for today. You have comms tonight, right? I nodded. Well then, I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. Also, don't forget to add Hindu ritual supplies to the yearly order. We have some Hindu staff coming to live on station with the next carrier. We have some basics to tide us over, but we'll need more. If they're up for it, we might want to celebrate Holi with the whole station. We can't do the bonfires or the powder, but we can certainly eat food and paint each other. Yeah, that would be kind of fun. I'll see what I can get out of the supply corps. I gave her a look, and she just smiled back. I noted that she had deftly avoided my accusation. Great, thanks. See you tomorrow, Marcia said, and she buried her head in a tablet. I hesitated a second, then left the chaplain's office. Are all chaplains this crafty, or is it just this particular one, I thought. All priests talk in riddles, the voice replied. I wasn't asking you, I muttered out loud to myself. But I smiled, too. Whoever it was, they weren't wrong. Jenny waved as I walked in. Hey, you're back. Mark said you'd be on watch tonight. Feeling better? Yeah, a bit. Thanks, Jenny. Great. Thankfully, it's a slow day today. Not much mail coming through. Really? I said. my senses perking up. Yeah, no priority traffic at the moment, but they must be busy planetside with all the building and stuff now. I frowned. Probably. We should keep an eye on it, though. Why? What's wrong with a slow comms day? Jenny asked, as she stood up and let me have the comm station chair. Nothing, really. It's when it becomes more than one slow day is when it's a problem. I watched her think about it. After a minute, her eyes opened wide and her face paled. I nodded. Oh, yeah. It's easy to forget how dangerous pre-call is when it's so exciting, the ensign said, soberly. True, but when it goes well, it really is exciting. I paused, then said, Don't forget that you're looking for comm traffic patterns while you're sorting. Because of the delay, those patterns can mean life or death. Jenny gulped and nodded. Listen, don't worry about it, Jenny. Just remember, okay? I'll double-check the logs tonight. You're probably right, and it's just a slow day after their building spree. That's pretty normal in the month or so after boots. Go on, get some dinner. Chef made a Genovian chocolate cake again. Jenny smiled again. Thanks, sir. She clapped her hands together and practically squeed. Ooh, cake. Yay! As she bounced out of ops. I couldn't help but smile after she left. Gotta love the optimists, I thought. I turned to my work, sorting the incoming mail, waving to Foster and Cho as they came in. They were happy to see me back at comms, and said so. After thanking them, I got back to work. The ensign wasn't wrong. It was a slow comms day. No priority messages, and most of the communications were the automated satellite check-ins and the official daily logs from the mission commander and science director. Communique for the CMO for medical supplies. But that was it. No personal mail to be routed to other colonies or people on station. I wasn't sure what to do. It had been a couple of months since boots on the ground, and Jenny wasn't wrong about how mail slows down while they're building out the settlement, but this felt weird to me. I brought up the mail stats for the last month, and there was a trend to less mail. That could still be attributed to construction, but my gut was saying otherwise. Marcia did say to start listening to my intuition, I thought. Okay, then. Commander? Yes, Jack, asked Foster. Sir, the mail is unusually light today, sir. Pretty much only the commander and director's log, status updates, and a resupply request to the CMO, but no real personal mail. Foster was quiet for a second. Is it the first day of no personal mail? It looks like it, sir. Flag it and leave a note for the other comms officers to keep an eye out. Hopefully it's just because they had a heavy building day and are too tired to ride home. My gut screamed otherwise, but I couldn't prove it. Yes, sir. Because the mail got done early, the rest of my shift was pretty quiet. I had a feeling there was more coming. But was that real? I didn't know. Something's going on down there, Marcia. I can feel it, I said the next day during our session. I paced the room in my frustration. I could feel the chaplain's eyes following me as I went back and forth. I know, some slow mail days don't prove anything. But the comm traffic reports are pretty consistent with the crew being just after boots, Jack. Even you've said that. I stopped pacing and flopped down in the chair across from her desk, feeling defeated. I know, but the priority mails while the Canaries were out, then a slowdown in personal comms not long after boots? I just have a bad feeling that something's happening with them and we're missing it. Marcia took a breath and said, There's another factor I want you to consider here. I want you to really think about this too. Your last pre-call assignment ended in tragedy, both on the ground and in your scaper. You have severe PTSD from that experience. I started to reply to that, but she held up a hand. Hear me out, Jack. She paused, and I nodded. Your duty before that was some station rotations and carrier duty. You do know what signs to look for in case of trouble, and that's a good thing. But it's all colored by your previous experience. With your PTSD and anxiety, you can be prone to obsession or seeing situations as bigger than they are. I opened my mouth and closed it. I thought for a minute, then said, I don't think I'm wrong. And you might not be. But I want you to consider that even if there is something going on, it may not be as bad as you think. It could be as simple as the team having a hard time with building their settlement. Right now, it seems like things are still okay. I'm trying to give you a little perspective to go with your diligence, so it keeps you from having an anxiety attack. I still felt I was right about something happening on the planet, but I had to admit she had a point. Even if something was going on, it doesn't mean that there were flesh-eating bug creatures or whatever. I took a deep breath and let it out. Yeah, I suppose you're right, I said, resigned. I'm not saying to give up on due diligence, though, she said, or making sure the ensigns do the same. And like I said, even if you are blowing it out of proportion, you may also not be wrong. When I showed up for my next comm shift, Jenny happily announced that it was a busy shift for her, and I sighed a small sigh of relief when people weren't looking. When Jenny left, I checked the comm stats, and sure enough, the traffic had picked back up quite a bit. Still on the light side, but not too far from normal. Maybe I was making too much of it after all, I thought. The next few weeks were the same. Steady stream of mail during comms duty and my normal duties as RPS. Before I knew it, the end of the year was approaching, which meant the holidays. I really hadn't celebrated any type of holiday for a long time, but Unity always remembered to include special rations and other supplies for the celebrations. Stations typically kept a Unity hub calendar, and pre-call teams usually correlated the Unity calendar with the new planets once they confirmed its planet, moon, and solar rotations. But really, no one missed out. One afternoon at the end of November, Marcia came over to my desk and asked, "Jack, are any of your ensigns off duty this afternoon?" I thought for a second. I think some of the first shifters might be getting off duty soon, and I think Jenny has the day off. Why? Marcia smiled widely. Well, if you haven't noticed yet, it's almost December, and we need to make a trip to 0G storage for the holiday decorations and supplies. We could use a couple of extra hands bringing it up to the lab and for putting them out. Besides, doing it with more people is fun. Why don't we just use the lift? I asked. Oh, we will, but we need to go directly to the airlock at the moment. Supply Corps doesn't have the people to spare since they're starting the end-of-year inventory. Come on, we don't get to float down the core all that often. I laughed and pointed a finger at her. You're just looking for an excuse to go muck around in 0G. She tried to look innocent, then smiled. Well, yes, but I promise I'll make it worth your while. 0G wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but it was hard to resist Marcia's enthusiasm. Okay, fine. I'll get the box numbers and send a note around. When should folks get here? About 15:30. Have them meet us at the upper hab stairs near engineering. Anne, looking quite pleased with herself, she practically skipped out of the chapel. I smiled in spite of myself. Marcia seems superhuman sometimes, but then she did something like this, and I remember that she's just as human as the rest of us. I checked people's schedules and made the arrangements. To my surprise, Jenny, Mark, and their friend Chris all agreed to help. They seemed as excited as Marcia. Excellent, exclaimed Marcia when we met up with them at the upper hab stairs. Thanks, everyone, for coming. You ready? Yes, ma'am, the rest of us chorused. Jenny was practically bouncing on her toes. Let's go, Marcia said, as if she was commanding troops into battle. I shrugged and followed her up the stairs with the rest of the crew behind me. Eventually the spiral staircase gave way to a ladder. The gravity became lower as we reached the center of the hab wheel. When we reached the core, Marcia keyed open the door, and we all piled into the central tunnel of the station. The walls of the tunnel had rails and handholds covered in thin but soft foam padding. There are rumors that some of the third shift engineers had races up and down the core, which the captain officially denies, but the captain also tried not to really deny anyone any type of fun on the station so long as no one gets hurt. Besides, during some of my insomnia nights, I'd seen the captain and some of their friends sneak up the upper hab stairs themselves. The door closed behind us, and Marcia grinned like a little kid. Race ya, she yelled, and she was off down the core like a shot. The rest of us stared at each other, then Jenny shot down after her. Chris followed, laughing, as they decided to spin down the core. Mark hesitated. What is it? I asked. Me and 0G don't always get along, he said with a gulp. You don't have to go down to the core. You could wait up for us here. We'll need more help packing stuff into the lift. The ensign shook his head. Nope, I'm going to do this. If I don't, Jenny will never let me live it down. Mark took a deep breath. Okay, here we go, he said, then carefully made his way down the core using the handholds. I followed him after taking my own deep breath. The core tunnel was pretty large, since it had to move cargo up from the zero-G storage to the hab. Most of the time it was automated, but during inventory, supply had to shut it all down so that the supply core folks didn't get hit by cars as they counted supplies. I didn't envy the supply people during this time, as most of them spent hours in EVA suits just scanning boxes. Not my idea of a good time, anyway. Mark and I caught up with the others at the airlock between the normal atmosphere part of the core and the cold storage. I palmed the panel next to the airlock and pressed the call button. I could see a suited person through the small windows on the other side of the doors. "Hey, Kirby, what's up?" said Ensign Cho, much to my surprise. "Cho, what are you doing out here?" "I moonlight with supply when I'm non-ops. They needed some half-shift help for inventory, so I volunteered. What can I help you with?" "Marcia and I need the holiday supplies so we can start decorating." "Oh, excellent! I love the holidays. Can I help decorate later?" I looked at Marcia, who smiled and nodded. I turned back to the comm panel and said, "Yeah, sure, if you're not too tired." "Nah, I love decorating." "Okay, punch in the box numbers and I'll sort the cart out myself." I sent the data, and Cho gave me a thumbs up through the window. About 10 minutes later, the comm panel beeped, and Cho's voice came through again. "Okay, folks, I found it all for you. You'll need to load the hab lift yourself, then have someone bring this cart back down since we don't have the automatic controls on right now. Stand by." The door on the other side of the airlock opened, and Cho pushed in a cart with 10 medium-sized boxes in it. She pulled the manual brake, then went back into the cold storage side, keying the door closed. "I'll see you all later. Don't forget to close the airlock." "Will do, Cho. See you later," I replied, while we waited for the light to turn green so we could open the door. "Nice to have another helper," said Marcia, "although I'm sure once word gets around, we'll find more people just dropping by to see how it's going." She gave a pointed look at Jenny, who blushed but laughed. "I may have mentioned it to a few people on the way over," she said with a sheepish grin. The rest of us laughed. After another set of beeps, the lights turned green. I keyed the door open, and Mark and Chris went into the airlock to disengage the brake. Marcia unlocked the pull rope, and she and Chris started moving back up the core, with the rope furling it out behind them. I double-checked the boxes with my wrist comm while they went back up the core, and then the rest of us maneuvered the cart out of the lock and closed the door. "How you doing, Mark?" I asked him quietly. "Better than I thought," he replied. Jenny eyed him. "Don't tell me with all your space bragging you don't like zero-G." Mark winced. "Zero-G isn't for everyone, Ensign," I chided. She took the hint and left it alone. Mark gave me a grateful look, but I had a feeling Jenny would bring it up with him later. Well, at least Mark is learning some humility now, I thought. My wristcom chimed, and Marcia's voice said, "You all ready for a ride back there?" "1 second," I said, then turned to Mark and Jenny, motioning them to hold onto the cart. "Okay, Vicar, we're ready." "What's a Vicar?" Mark asked, but I couldn't give an answer as I released the brake and we shot up the core like a rocket. Jenny laughed and whooped. I just hung on and smiled. Mark said, "Shit!" and white-knuckled the handholds. Without electricity, the cart wasn't magnetically tied to the rails, which made for a fun ride if you had someone to catch you on the other end. The ride up with the cart was faster than going down to the airlock. Chris and Marcia were laughing by the winch, and I had to admit the ride back up was pretty fun. I smiled at them and then pulled the brake. I looked over to Jenny and Mark. While Jenny was grinning like a kid, Mark looked a little green. I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Come on, let's get this on the lift." Mark started unstrapping the boxes while I got the cargo lift door open. After getting all the boxes in the lift, he looked like he felt a bit more human. "Who wants to bring this cart back with me?" Marcia asked. "I'll do it," said Jenny. She helped Marcia take down the winch and stow the pull rope. Marcia laughed and turned to me. "Okay, send us down. Jack, you should go back down first to make sure the cart I reserved is still down by the lift. Okay, I said. Meet in the chapel when we're done? Asked Jenny. Yep, I said. Chris and Mark nodded too. Right then, we'll be back. And the two of them sped off with the cart. I pushed the button to send the lift down to the hab and moved over to the ladder. You gotta admit, Mark, that was kind of fun. The younger man swallowed hard and followed after me. Yeah, but I wish it didn't feel like I left my stomach out in cargo. I hear that, I said. Chris laughed as we made our way back into the hab. By the end of December, I didn't need to wonder anymore why Marcia wanted to take that jaunt down the core. It was amazing to me to learn just how many holidays were celebrated during the month of December. In fact, for the last couple weeks of the month, I was excused from comms duty because there were so many services between winter solstice and New Year's that Marcia needed me full-time. I was tired, but Marcia was exhausted, since not only was she doing extra services, but she was also keeping up her regular sessions of counseling and spiritual direction. Are you sure you're up to doing the watch night service, Marcia? I asked her, as we were setting up the chapel during the day. I mean, I can finish this if you want to go and rest for a while. You don't have any appointments this afternoon. What, you don't think this old lady can handle it? She said, with some heat. No, that's not what I meant, I replied, feeling a little hurt. Marcia turned, saw my face, sighed, and put the last candle in the Kwanzaa Kinara. I'm sorry, Jack. I was just teasing, really. I didn't mean to bite your head off. I suppose you're right and should take a nap. What time is the Kwanzaa service? 1600. Marcia tapped her wristcon. All right, I'm going to go have some tea and relax for a bit. You really don't mind finishing up here? Nah, I don't mind. Marcia smiled with relief and left. Take a nap, I yelled after her, but she just waved and kept walking. I smiled. Even if she didn't take a nap, I'm glad she decided to go and rest. I began humming to myself as I finished up the altar, then moved on to set up the tables for the snacks and drinks that the cook was going to bring over later. I was digging more decorations out of a box when I heard footsteps behind me. Turned around to find Jenny looking around the chapel. Hey, Jenny, what's up? Wow, Jack, this looks so cool. I don't know if those of us doing the mess hall can compete. I laughed. Don't worry about it. It's only because we get nicer stuff to play with. Being a chaplain apparently means nicer decorations. So what's up? Jenny smiled, but it didn't really reach her eyes. Oh, never mind. It's probably not important. She turned to leave the chapel. Wait, come in, have a seat. There's nothing that's unimportant out here. Jenny hesitated. I could see her weighing something in her head. No, really, she said. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Her voice sounded somewhat like her perky self, but something felt off. She waved and walked out the door. But, I said, but she had already disappeared. She's lying, said the voice. I know, I replied to the voice, but why? Chapter 10. Jack. After the holidays were over, Marcia took a few days off by order of the captain. I'm sure she suspected that I had something to do with that order. Thing was, the captain didn't need me to tell them that Marcia needed some rest. I went to visit the captain on New Year's Day and found that they'd already ordered her to take the time off. Don't worry, Jack. I'll make her take some time off even if I have to keep her under house arrest. I don't think you'll have to do that, sir, especially if I disable the biometrics for the lock on her office door. The captain laughed. Don't let logistics know you can do that. No, I think if I give her the choice, she'll go quietly. Right. Thank you, sir. I turned to leave their office. So what about you? I turned back around. Sir? You were pretty busy too, Jack. Take a couple days off. I opened my mouth to try and argue, but they raised their hand. That wasn't really a suggestion, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, I said, and walked out of their office. The hub track was mostly empty, so I decided to take a walk. It was pretty late at night and quiet except for the folks switching from second to third shift. A few people waved when they saw me, and I waved back. It was the night of my first day off, and I was already bored. I did try to catch up on sleep, but staying in my bunk just led to being in my head, no matter how much I liked the quiet. It hit me as I was halfway around the hab that I really seemed to be doing okay, for the first time in a long time. I was sleeping well. The doctor had lowered my meds. Hell, I had even made some friends. Is this what it's like to feel normal? I thought. For a relative definition of normal, the voice in my head replied. Oh, fuck off, I told it. You asked, it replied again. I sighed and kept moving. It actually felt good to just walk. Eventually I walked past the machine shop back towards the gym. There was noise coming from the machine shop, and I waved to the machinist as I walked past the window. Turning into the gym to use the toilets, I heard voices in the changing area. I quietly moved to the side of the door and listened. Sam, the staff are going to find out soon anyway. You might as well announce it, said Jansen. I heard the movement of cloth. Fucking hell, Kate, do you think I want to keep this quiet with lives at stake? Carr hasn't been able to find any way to cure this thing yet, and I've got that fucking Unity prick breathing down my neck. Fuck that asshole, Sam. He's a paper pusher thinking he can make a fortune because he knows the right senator. There's 60 lives at stake here. After a long pause, they gave a hard sigh. I've never failed a pre-call, Kate. Neither have you. We have to make this work. We will make this work. Silence. Then I heard footsteps. I quietly moved to one of the treadmills, quickly shoved on a music headset, trying to make it look like I had just come in. Jansen, gym bag in hand, left quickly. I got on the treadmill, and a few minutes later the captain emerged. They were so preoccupied they didn't even look to see if anyone else was in the gym. When both their footsteps faded, I got off the treadmill. Fuck me, I was right, I said out loud. Don't gloat, the voice said. I shook my head. Gloating was farthest from my mind, but damned if I was going to let another pre-call team die. I went back to my bunk and put on my uniform, making sure I had my tablet in my pocket. I wasn't supposed to be on duty, but knowing Foster and a certain perky ensign, I could wheedle-wit my way on shift. Foster shook his head when I walked into ops. Come on, Kirby, you got extra time off. Why don't you go do something fun like watch a vid or, hell man, just sleep? I didn't have to try to look exasperated. Sir, I slept nearly all day yesterday. Marsha's on leave too, and I'm bored. Just let me do my regular shift, eh? Foster sighed. Fine, but you're making the ensigns look bad. He grinned, then turned to Jenny, who was practically bouncing out of her seat. Oh, go on, get out of here. Let Mark know he doesn't have to cover for Jack tonight, would you? I'll send him a written message in about a minute. Well, go on, Kirby. You're a glutton for punishment, you are. Thanks, sir, I said, and calmly took my seat. I was just starting to dig into the message analysis when the captain walked in. Foster stood, but Beckett waved him back down. Just passing through, Mick, they said. Couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd catch up on some paperwork. I'll be in my office. Don't bother to wake Simmons. They don't need to lose sleep just because I am. Let me know if you need anything. They walked out of ops and into their office. The door closed behind them. Lucky you, Kirby, they didn't see you, said Foster with a chuckle. Okay, folks, let's get back to work. Cho, aren't we due a picket? Yes, sir, at 0500. Excellent. Remind supply, would you? Said Foster. While Foster and Cho talked over scheduling, I turned back to my station. I called up all the station comm logs from decision day until now. The comm traffic was normal until about a month and a half in. I checked the date and logs. Holy shit. The day that I logged the priority message was a week after the Canaries, who were usually the first to expose themselves on a planet, left their suits, all marked confidential by the captain. It was just after I started comms duty not quite a year ago. I zoomed out the chart, and then I could see a clear pattern, with another set of priority messages from a month ago. And from then on, the traffic leveled out, with no heavy or light days, just the same amount of data every day. The private mail fluctuated a bit, but even that was a little too even for normal human correspondence. Fuck me, this is all sorts of wrong. I pulled out my tablet and set it to download the message logs. I made sure the tablet screen was off and set to work on today's messages. One priority message and several standard telemetry messages. Sir, priority message for the captain. Route it through their office, Jack. Yes, sir. I routed it to the captain, but I also made a copy to my tablet before the captain could mark it confidential. This is impossible, I said out loud later in my bunk, while I did a more detailed analysis on the data. I could feel the data wasn't quite right. It was low volume, but not low enough to throw up any red flags. The ensigns would have missed it, or chalked it up to the team being busy. But the data stream was flat. The same amount of data each day. The headers were all correct, as were the signatures. The files looked like the right type of files, and all of them were encrypted properly. I pulled up another analysis program. This one wasn't exactly a standard issue, but I always kept a copy. Thank you, Chief Wilson, I thought, as I fed the data into it. Wilson may have been a bastard during my crypto security classes at the comm school, but his security paranoia rubbed off on all his students, including me. The data finished loading, and I waited for the program to run its course. The analysis finally came up on the screen, and I almost dropped my tablet. The hash digests for the emails were all different like they should be, but the data files had identical hash digests, as if they were all the same file. Oh, fuck. Someone's been doctoring the logs, I thought. And there's not too many people who can do that on station. In fact, the only people who had the right access to change files like that were the captain, the XO, and maybe one or two other people, and it was usually bad for them to do so. I looked at the tablet again, but the proof was staring me in the face. The captain and the XO were covering up a failure, and they knew it. By rights, I should march myself to the Unity political office and report this to the legal team. But what had Beckett said? That the political officer was breathing down their neck? You can't go there. There's something wrong there, too. You need backup, the voice said. For once, the voice and I were in total agreement. I'd only seen the PO a few times, and had barely said 2 words to the guy, but each time I was in range of the man, he made me want to take a bath. No, I couldn't go there. I tucked the tablet back into the pocket of my coveralls and went to look for Marcia. By luck, I found the chaplain in the station library. I met Mark on his way to the mess hall, and he'd said he'd seen her go in on his way out of ops for the day. I thanked the ensign and made my way to the library at a steady pace, trying to stay calm. Even though the sleeping dragon of PTSD in my stomach was awake and alert. The library is more of the size of a large office, with one wall of actual physical books, 2 listening stations, 2 work terminals, and a few comfortable chairs to read in. It wasn't like you couldn't download anything to your tablet from anywhere on the station, but this room was always reserved for quiet study, especially since the bunk area could be noisy. There were also privacy booths where you could record video mail, and I could see Marcia in one with the red light above the booth indicating a recording in progress. I grabbed a random book from the shelves, opened it, and leafed through the pages, not really paying attention as I waited for her to finish. Until one page seemed to catch on my fingers. I looked down, and the page was open to a picture of a woman in a black cloak with a sword sheathed around her waist and a crow on her shoulder. The image resonated in me as if I touched some faulty wiring in the machine shop. The text under the picture just said, "The Morrigan." I stared at the picture, feeling like I knew who the Morrigan was already. "Ah, you found me," the voice in my head laughed. What the? I thought, but then heard the sound of the booth door releasing. I closed the book and put it in a different pocket of my coveralls. The recording booth door opened, and Marcia stepped out. "Jack," she said, "I was just sending some mail to my niece, since it's been a while since I've talked to her. Hopefully I can avoid getting guilt trips in my next letter from her. Anyway, how are you? I heard you went back on duty early. Not insomnia again, I hope." "No, nothing like that. I wanted to check something." I rubbed my head and looked at the door. Anyone could walk in. Not good. Can I talk with you privately?" Marcia took another look at me, this time seeming to really see the state I was in. Sure, Jack. Let's go to my office. Maybe more private than that? I didn't think her office would be safe enough. Plus, if someone saw her there, people would assume she was back on duty even though she still had another day of leave. Okay, my bunk then. I could feel her demeanor shift as we walked out of the library. He's let her know it's serious, said the voice, which I somehow knew now was the Morrigan. Who's he? I asked. Not my story to tell, the Morrigan replied. Morrigan stayed quiet after that, as Marcia and I made our way down to the bunk level and to her quarters. Marcia palmed open the door, waved me in, and put on the privacy lock. Shit, if anyone saw us, there'll be all sorts of rumors by tomorrow. I shrugged at myself as I sat in the desk chair. Not that I care about rumors, really. Marcia sat on her bed. So, Jack, mind telling me what's wrong? I pulled out the tablet, switched it on, and handed it to her. She looked at it for a minute, then shrugged. You're going to have to explain this to me. I'm no computer scientist or comms person. I gave myself a mental kick and took the tablet back. Sorry. I changed to the mail traffic analysis graph and showed it to her again. This is an analysis of all the pre-call team's email traffic since decision day, right before I got here. This slight increase here is when we got several priority messages on my shift, about a week after the Canaries took off their environmental suits. It stays normal until about a month after boots on the ground, and then starts trending downward until the last couple of weeks where it flattens out. Not enough to set off the normal flags, but you can see it if you do this type of analysis. Marcia's eyes opened wide. You were right. I wish I wasn't. Marcia looked up from the tablet to me. There's more, isn't there? This alone isn't necessarily something that would start the failure protocol. I nodded, took back the tablet, and switched to the hash digest analysis. Okay, so you know all of the data we send is encrypted, right? She nodded, so I continued. Right, so part of the process is that the data is sent in this hash digest form instead of plain text. Each digest is unique, and the message and the attached data each have different hash digests. Always unique, even if the messages have the same contents. So, on the surface, all these messages make it look like we're still getting the standard information, but all the data files have the same 3 hash digests. Which means that someone is tampering with the logs to make it look like there's not a problem. But if I filter out the dummy data, there's been nothing real coming from the pre-call team for about a week. Marcia opened her eyes wide again. Your premonition was right. They really are failing. I nodded. Marcia stood up, handed me back the tablet, and began to pace the room. We have to tell the captain. I hesitated, opened my mouth, and closed it again. What? She asked. They already know. I overheard them in the XO in the gym. I recounted the conversation to her. Marcia sat again. Her face went stony. Shit. This all makes sense now. Carr's been pretty cagey with me and looking really stressed. He must have been secretly working on whatever the problem is with the Xenobio team. Some of his staff have been coming to me with stress-related issues, but they won't tell me why. And Jim... What about him? I asked, maybe a bit quicker than the chaplain expected. He's been, trying to distract me, even though I've told him before that I'm asexual. Marcia blushed a little, but he's been a bit old-fashioned about it. Gross, I said out loud, and decided to keep an eye on the jerk of a psychiatrist. Then immediately said, Not you, him. Marcia grimaced. I know what you meant. We sat in silence for a minute. I took a breath and said, Well, what do we do? We can't let these people die out there, and if it's some sort of illness, they may not be able to get themselves to the scaper, or they could die in transit. It's not like they can just instantly get off the planet. Never mind that they'd immediately be shoved into quarantine once they got here. I shuddered at the thought, as images of the quarantine hab jumped in my head. I could see their eyes, feel them accusing, blaming me for the dead. I could feel Hans pulling him off me and seeing the drops of blood floating. Jack! Like bright red beads in the zero-G, I watched them float by. Jack! I felt hands on my head, and a wave of warmth flowed over me. I blinked, and instead of the quarantine habit, it was Marcia, with her hands on either side of my head, in her quarters. I could feel tears on my face. Where were you? I shook my head. Quarantine hab. I scrubbed the tears away with my sleeve and took another deep breath. Marcia, we can't let them die out there. It's a cruel way to go. Her dark eyes looked into mine, searching for something. Does anyone else know about this? I'm not sure, I said. But then a memory floated up to the surface. Actually, maybe. Jenny came into the chapel on New Year's Eve after I sent you to take a nap, and it seemed like she wanted to talk to me about something, but then said it wasn't important and that she just wanted to say hi. I knew she was lying to me then, but forgot to ask her about it later. Then again, that could be nothing. Where would she be now? She looked at her wristcom. Just about noon. She's second shift, so probably on her way to the mess. Marcia nodded, then started tapping her wristcom. It beeped, then a voice answered. Hi, Marcia. What's up? Said Jenny through the wristcom. Hi, Jenny. Can you come to my quarters? You can bring your lunch, Marcia said. Sure. What? Great, Jenny. See you in a bit, Marcia said, and cut off the comms before Jenny could ask anything else. Chapter 11. Jenny. Marcia had never asked me to her quarters before. In fact, I don't think anyone's been to her quarters except for maybe Jack, since he was her RPS. I held on to my takeout container tightly as I pushed the door comb. Come in, Marcia said. Marcia was standing in the doorway when it opened. She stepped aside, and I saw Jack sitting at her desk with a tablet in hand. I nearly dropped my lunch, but I grabbed it with my other hand before it fell. Holy fuck, they know. They've gotta know, I thought. Marcia waved me in and keyed the privacy lock after the door closed. I felt both trapped and relieved. What's going on, Marcia? I said, trying not to sound terrified. Jack? Marcia prompted. I turned to Jack, shaking. He showed me what he'd found and explained about the hash digest, then said, There's very few people on this station with the technical know-how to pull this off, and fewer people who have the access to do it, or the clearance to give someone else access. Did you see the captain or XO or anyone else do anything weird with the mail lately? He stared at me, and I froze. They're going to hate me when I tell them. Last thing I wanted was for Jack and Marcia to think badly of me. Another part of my brain said, You need to tell them. These are people you can trust. Marcia touched my shoulder and steered me to the bunk. The chaplain kneeled down in front of me. Listen, Jenny, we can help protect you under the whistleblower laws if you have information, but we need to know who did this and why. The people on planet are probably in danger or possibly even dying. Right now, we don't even know if they're dead, alive, or so sick they can't call for help. We need to know. I looked from Jack to Marcia and back again, then looked at the floor. It was me. I doctored the messages. I started shaking harder, and Marcia took the container from me before I spilled it. It was Officer Morgan. He forced me to do it. The ensign took a deep breath. I tried to say no, but he said the captain approved of it, and... I paused. And what? Jack asked, anger showing on his face. He knew who I used to be. He had proof. I turned my head away from the two of them, ashamed. Who you used to be? Proof? Of what? Jack asked. Marcia didn't say anything. I took another breath. That I was a hacker in the Kozalezi on New York Colony. Jack let out a low whistle. Marcia didn't flinch. I continued. My last job for them had a huge payout, so I used that and my other profits to disappear, make new creds, and do my transition surgeries. Then I decided to go into the academy. It seemed like the perfect place to hide, plus I got room and board, which was necessary since I used a lot of my ready cash for my surgeries and to pay for the academy. Government computers aren't all that hard to break into, so I was able to give myself some backstory. Made myself a history from Geneva Colony, passed the exams, graduated, and ended up here. How long ago was it? About 6 years ago or so. I thought I'd gotten free of my father's influence until Morgan... He has proof that I forged my personal and medical records. I turned back to the two of them. I thought I was so careful. I know I purged all my medical records, and I thought my hack into Unity was untraceable. I was one of the best, but Morgan has to have someone as good as me, or better, somewhere. I mean, Neiman just doesn't leave the cause without really disappearing, you know? What? Jack exclaimed. You're kidding. What? Marcia asked, perplexed. Jack turned to Marcia and explained. About 10 years ago, there was a major hack on New York Colony's largest bank. It was after the Kozolesi family sued the bank for giving their family's private information to the New York Colony government and lost. The bank never really recovered from the hack and ended up having to declare bankruptcy. The hacker responsible was only known as Niemand and was never caught. Marcia's eyes widened. Jack looked at me with awe, which I didn't deserve. Yeah, I changed gender along with my name. The surgeries were rough. I mean, I was planning to do them anyway, but I wanted out of that life as much as I wanted to transition. Shit, you must have been just a kid when that hack went down, I said. I nodded. Morgan has my medical records with my dead name. That could lead the cause straight for me, I said in a small voice. I wouldn't be surprised if my father had every bounty hunter from here to Earth out looking for me. Shit, Jack said. Marcia took my hands in theirs. I can't make promises, but if you help us take this bastard down, I'll do all in my power to protect you. I'll try and keep you out of this as much as I can, even if I have to take a shuttle and find a survey ship for you. I was skeptical, but nodded. Marcia looked at both of us in turn, then asked, Do you think anyone else knows about the pre-call team? I let out a laugh. With medical and xenobio being all secretive and weird? Please. Everyone knows something's up. Mark even thinks the patterns are a little weird, but he's too lazy to really actually do any digging, especially since I made it so the lack of mail didn't ping any flags. He hasn't said anything, especially not with that damn P.O. in the captain's office every other day. Marcia stood up and turned to Jack. I'm sorry I doubted your instinct. No worries. You weren't really wrong in the beginning either. So now what? He asked. Now we take it to the captain. Jenny, stay in my room until we come get you. Best if Morgan doesn't know exactly where you are at the moment. Don't answer your wrist comm for anyone except me and Jack. In fact, turn it off. Hopefully by the time we get back, that man will be in the brig. Marcia started to walk out. Jack put up a hand. Hang on a second. Jenny, was this what you were going to come and tell me about on New Year's? I hung my head. Yeah, I really wanted to, but... Jack patted me on the arm. Okay, let's go, Marcia. Jack. The captain should be in their office, I hope. I know they're working first shift this week, Marcia said when we exited the lift. I actually had to walk faster to keep up. I wondered again how a woman of her size could move that fast. She paused outside ops. Listen, Jack, don't mention Jenny or her involvement yet, she said quietly. We have enough evidence from you to at least rattle cages. Hopefully, I can just get Sam to do the right thing. Follow my lead. I nodded, then we barged through ops and into the outer offices of the captain and the XO. Simmons looked up from his terminal. Hi, Marcia. The captain's in a meeting right now. It's important. I need to speak to the captain immediately. They looked apologetic. I can't. They're in with the political officer. They said they weren't to be disturbed. Marcia grimaced. You could almost hear the capital letters of the title when the ensign spoke. Oh, good. I need to talk to him, too. She gave the ensign a withering look, and at that moment I could see a different spirit come through Marcia. The ensign cringed and pushed the button to unlock the door. She turned to the open door, and I followed in her wake. The poor ensign looked terrified. I motioned them to sit down, and they fell back in their chair with relief. I felt bad for them to have to be on the receiving end of scary Marcia. I'll ask the chef to make them something nice to make up for it later, I thought. It's not a good time to be barging in like this, Marcia, I heard the captain exclaim as I walked into the office. Sam, we have to talk now. Someone else in the office cleared their throat. Now see here, this is not only rude, but insubordination. As just a chaplain, you should know your place. Marcia turned toward the small, greasy man and gave him the full force of the same scary look that she had just given the ensign. Morgan recoiled, looking confused. If the situation hadn't been so serious, I would have laughed. Marcia turned her attention back to the captain. They stared at each other for a long moment. Wait for it, the Morgan whispered gleefully in my head. Finally, the captain relented, a mixture of fear and relief on their face. Fuck, right. Both of you have a seat. Sam pressed the palm plate on his desk. Marcia took the only other chair in the room. I stayed standing. Who else knows? They asked. It's not a big station, Sam. Was Xenobio and MedLab sworn to secrecy? Most people know something is going on with the team. I was suspicious of something because of Carr, but it was Jack who did the actual digging through the data. Unity doesn't recruit idiots, Sam. And I overheard you and the XO in the gym the other night, I added, helpfully. Marcia leaned forward in her chair. Sam, you have to call it. There's been nearly a week without any personal correspondence at all. That means it's been 3 weeks dirtside. For all we know, they're already dead. Call it. Or you'll do what, Reverend? You call this mission, Beckett, and there'll be an inquiry and court-martial. I'll make sure of it. Unity needs this planet to work. Marcia turned on the man again. At what cost, Political Officer Morgan? Do you really want the murder of 60 people on your hands? She turned back to the captain. Do you, Sam? The captain put their head in their hands and was silent for a moment. They then looked at me. I take it you have proof about the logs. Yes, sir, I said. How? The hacker was good, but lazy. They forgot about the hash digest for the attachments, and made the data curve too clean. The captain nodded. I didn't offer my tablet, and the captain didn't ask if I had to break glass or not. Good thing I didn't have to, I thought, especially since we all have to be part of an inquiry now. I just now realized that Jenny had probably left tracks on purpose. What do we do, Jack? You've been on a fail. I've never had a failure, the captain asked. I blinked. Well, I've only been on it from dirt side, and it was a completely different type of fail. From a comms perspective, though, we need to make some sort of contact to figure out the current situation. Marcia nodded. You need to tell everyone here, too, and call the emergency, she said, reminding him of his duty. The captain nodded and stood up. Marcia and I followed. Morgan jumped to his feet, trying to block the captain from exiting. You can't do this! The captain gave him a stoic look, then seemed to come to a decision. Beckett leaned into the man so they could look him in the eye. You know what, you little fuck? I'm done. You may have gotten me this position, but I'm still a fucking Unity officer, and I don't answer to you. From this moment on, you have no say in anything in any way. So either you can go quietly back to your quarters and stay there, or I can have security drag you to the nearest airlock. We're both fucked anyway, but at least I have recovered enough brains to do the right thing. I gave Marcia a quick look, and she nodded. Fine, Morgan said, and he turned around and walked out. I'd set security on him and his staff anyway, Marcia said. Captain nodded. Was planning to. They pressed the button on their desk. Kate, can you come in here, please? Yes, sir, said the XO's voice from the bridge. Within a few seconds, the XO entered the office with a look of anticipation on her face. She took in the sight of me and the chaplain and the look on the captain's face and said, Sam? I'm calling it. You are? She asked, looking hopeful. The captain nodded. The commander sat heavily in the recently vacated chair. Oh, thank the gods. Now? Yes, answered the captain. I need you to have security round up Morgan's people and put them under house arrest, and put plenty of security on them. I don't want that little turd of a political officer even putting a toe out of his quarters. He voluntarily went just now, but, well, Jansen nodded. Let's get the official announcement over with, and then have a senior staff meeting in 20 minutes. Jack, I want you there too, since you're the only one I know of who's been on a failed pre-call mission. They held up a hand. I know it was a different situation, but you'll have more of an idea of what's going to happen to them when they leave the planet in the scaper. We need all the information we can get to get them back alive. One more thing, Sam, before we go. Now that the political officer is gone, you need to figure out some sort of asylum for Ensign Fraser, Marcia said. Fraser? Why? Morgan blackmailed her into forging the logs. What? I thought it was one of his staff that did it. Marcia shook her head. Fuck, blackmailed with what? I'm invoking Chaplin's confidentiality in that one, Sam. The less people know, the better. She may not be able to run from it if Morgan outs her, but I'd rather she have a chance to come out of this with just a discharge instead of jail time. She's been punished enough. Captain looked thoughtful, then said, Okay, I'll figure something out. I let out a breath that I didn't realize I'd been holding. Let her work with me for now, doing RPS stuff, sir, I said. She'll be out of the way, and I can protect her. I was a little surprised that I volunteered myself, but I was starting to get into emergency mode, and all my protective and problem-solving instincts were kicking in. Okay, great. Do that. Let's go and get this done. They tapped the commander on the shoulder. She stood up and fell in behind them. Marcia and I followed behind the two officers. We went out into ops, and the captain relieved the watch officer. The captain and the commander went over to the comm station, and Mark jumped. Ensign, bring up the fail message, the captain said in an even voice. Mark opened his mouth for a moment, then said, Yes, sir. The ensign keyed up the commands, and both officers leaned over and put their hands on the screen. The captain spoke first. Voice confirmation of pre-colonization fail code, Captain Sam H. Beckett, Alpha 10 Blue. State of emergency procedures in effect. The commander repeated the command with their name and code number, and had the ensign send the message to the nearest picket. The captain moved over to the command station and sat. Put me on internal comms, ensign. Mark keyed the commands and said, Open, sir. Attention all personnel, this is the captain. We have lost communications with the pre-colonization team. I have, just now, with Commander Jansen, declared a state of emergency and sent the emergency codes to Unity. All hands will begin pre-call failure protocol procedures. Beckett out. Mark cut the comms channel. The captain turned to the commander, who looked relieved to be finally doing something. Commander, have the senior staff, along with Xenobio, meet in the conference room in 20 minutes. He gave Marcia a long look, and she nodded to them. Yes, sir. You have ops. I'll be in my office until then. And the captain said, then left. The commander took the seat the captain just vacated and started giving orders. Marcia turned back to me. I could see the relief on her face. Whatever spirit that had been with her in the captain's office was gone. She keyed something on her wrist comm, then looked up at me and said quietly, Go let Jenny know what happened with Morgan. It's probably best if she stays with one of us for a few days, as we don't know who else on station was working for the political officer. I keyed my door with the code so you can open it, which I just sent to your ISCOM. Have her get whatever she needs from her bunk and bring her to yours for now. Right. Do you think... I began. Marcia held up her hand. Not here, not now. Later. Get going since you need to get back for the meeting. I'll see you in a bit. The chaplain turned and walked towards the captain's office. I went in the opposite direction, noticing that Mark was watching me like a hawk as I left. As I stepped over the threshold and made my way to the lift, I wondered why, and if Mark was on our side or not. That, I thought, was a sad realization. Chapter 12. Marcia. Let her in, said Sam to their secretary. They pushed the button and the door opened. I walked in and Sam palmed it closed. Come to take my confession? Wrong denomination, but I'll do it if you want, I replied, sitting down. I stared at them for a good minute, then said calmly, What the fuck were you thinking, Sam? I've gotten to know you pretty well in this assignment, and I thought you cared more about your people than to sell them out for whatever you were offered. Sam's face fell, and they put their head in their hands. I'm fucked anyway, so... They sighed. It sounded good at the time. Do one last successful pre-call mission, get a share of the mining rights, and retired to my little college on Whithaven or run for Senate. McConnell made it sound so easy, and Morgan was his choice to send here for political officer. McConnell? He's from New York Colony, isn't he? I asked. I met him at Unity Hub a few times. I wasn't impressed. He must have offered you more than mining rights. They nodded. McConnell technically bought me with this station, and said that if it was successful, I could probably become a senator or get some other high office in Unity Fleet. They paused, and McConnell gave me an advance. Jesus Christ, Sam, you walked right into it. Sam lifted their head. I know, Marcia. Don't give me the lecture right now. So let me guess. Morgan knows you took the bribe and hung it over your head. They nodded again. I stared at them again, and the quiet seemed to stretch. They finally turned away from me and said, I'm not proud of this, Marcia. The only thing I could do now is make up for it by doing the right thing for the pre-call team. And for Jenny Fraser, too. They looked confused for a moment. You asked for protection for her earlier. What does she have to do with all this? I'm breaking privacy since I can guarantee that Morgan will find a way to release the information with his superiors now that he's under lock and key. It was Jenny who Morgan convinced to doctor the messages coming from the planet. Morgan has information about her past that he's blackmailing her with as well. I paused. Sam looked angry. Do whatever you can to protect her, I said. I leaned forward. I'm disappointed in you, but now that this is all out in the open, I know you'll do the right thing. You need my help with all of this, and if you want that help, you make sure Jenny's not destroyed in the process. Do you understand? I was sure that Papa Legba came out while I was talking, and by the look on Sam's face, it wasn't Papa's friendly side. Not that I was feeling too friendly towards Sam myself at the moment. I will do whatever I can, Marcia, they said, with resignation. Good. I'll see you at the staff meeting, Sam, I said, and left their office. They didn't say anything in reply. Jack. The conference room was crowded, as all the senior staff, some of the xenobioscientists, and me waited for the captain and the XO to arrive. I stood behind Marcia, too restless to sit. Several of the junior xenobioscientists were standing behind the CMO and his staff. The heads of engineering, supply, and physical plant were all there, along with Dr. Adelson. Keep an eye on that one, the Morgan murmured. He's not right. That, madam, we can both agree on, I thought at her. I heard the sound of a short laugh in my head at the formality as the captain and XO walked in. So, you all heard the announcement? Doctor, I apologize for forcing your staff into secrecy on this for so long, but now that it's all out in the open, will you catch us up to speed? And remember, Doc, not all of us are biologists. The exhausted-looking doctor rubbed a hand through his hair. Relief and a bit of anger showed on his face. Yes, right. So, from what we have from the data we got from the colony before it went dark is that the canaries got sick just after they took their suits off. It was basically flu-like symptoms for about a week, and then they were fine. From what the CMO described, they didn't feel 100% after that, but felt well enough to continue working. They analyzed blood samples from the canaries, but couldn't immediately find a virus or bacteria. They did see new antibodies in the blood, so they assumed that it was some sort of flu-like illness, that it was temporary, and figured that they'd all just get immunity once they left the scaper. After Boots, they all did get sick, but most of the team recovered, particularly the older team members and those who don't do that much hard physical labor. Those who were more fit never fully recovered and started to get sick again about 2 months ago, planet time. One of the biologists not affected took some muscle samples from the sickest and was able to determine some genetic defects in the mitochondrial DNA. That was the data they managed to send us, and it looks like whatever this is might be disrupting the ATP production in the cells, but we can't be sure without actual samples. We do see some weird DNA that isn't like human DNA in the mitochondria, and we think it might be some sort of virus or bacteria-like thing, but again, we can't say for sure without real samples. The captain thought for a moment. So what you're saying is that we have some sort of disease that's laying the pre-call team flat. We don't know exactly what it is, and you have no cure, correct? Yes. And we don't know whether the team is dead or not. That is correct. The room was silent. The captain looked stricken, but said quietly into the room, "Ideas?" One of the biology team spoke up. "Well, we could synthesize ATP and send it via picket. It'll take a few days before anyone would be able to be up and around again, and it's just a temporary measure, but it might be enough for some of them to get into the scaper." The captain turned to the CMO. "Oliver, would this work?" The doctor thought for a second. "Yes, it could, but she said it's only temporary. It's like dousing a plant with too much water, though. It might make the plant grow for a while, but eventually it'll kill it. If we had actual samples to test, we could scale the dosage, but..." They shrugged. "And that's if we had people well enough on the ground to actually give the injections." He stopped, seeming to look at something far away for a moment. "What we really need, Captain, is a Lightbringer." Some of the biologists in the room gasped. Others looked much more hopeful. The XO looked confused. "A Lightbringer? Who or what is that?" she asked the CMO. "Oh, sorry, the survey ship, Lightbringer. It would be the only way we could actually get samples quickly enough to figure this out in time to save the pre-call team. I did my residency there, and they have the most advanced xenobiology and biochemistry departments in the known galaxy. Depending on where it is at the moment, it could be here in days or hours. And they also have the Demon Riders." "The who?" I blurted out. The doctor smiled briefly. "Lucifer, the ship's AI, keeps a special picket crew of adrenaline junkies who like to do high-G maneuvers. They're mostly used for getting samples from the planets they're working on, but they also like to do 10G sprints for fun. Weird bunch, but useful in an emergency." The doctor turned back to the captain. "If anyone's going to be able to figure out what's happening on the planet fast, it'll be them." The captain nodded, paused for a moment to think, then said, "You're right, Doctor. Survey's tech is better than anything we have." "Right. I'll send out the call for Lightbringer. We'll probably end up with a carrier swinging by, too, since we sent up the flare." "Right, Doc. Have your team continue their work and get your data ready for when Lightbringer gets here. Engineering and supplies start preparing for deployment of the quarantine hab. We should have enough spare supplies for the hab, but let me know ASAP if you need to restock anything. Now that we're in emergency mode, we can get stuff relatively quickly. And if you need extra hands, snag them." They paused briefly for thought, then kept firing orders. "Marcia and Jim, start preparing the counseling plan for the pre-call team. Jack, I want you on comms duty full-time for the time being, so I'm officially promoting you to senior comms officer. I'll need your expertise there more." "Sorry, Marcia." She waved away the apology. "Can't be helped, Captain. We need to cancel services for the moment anyway." The captain nodded, paused, then looked at their hands. "I know there's going to be a lot of rumors about why we didn't see the problem sooner. When this crisis is over, I'll be taking full responsibility for the danger I put these people in, and for the political officer and staff doctoring the records." Many of the officers looked at each other, and while there was a little bit of surprise, the announcement didn't seem to come as a total shock. Interesting, I thought. "Political officer Robert Morgan will be under house arrest until we can ship him off for court-martial. His staff will be placed under 24/7 watch. Security assign officers to each one and have them help engineering with the hab and doing shifts in physical plant. Ted, I'm sure you can find something that needs mucking out before the hab goes online." The head of physical plant gave a mischievous grin and nodded. The captain looked around at the group. "Right, let's get our people home. Dismissed." Everyone started filing out of the room. Marcia stood up, and as we also started to leave, the captain said, "Marcia, Jack, come back to my office, would you?" "Yes, sir," Marcia said. She looked at me. I shrugged, and we followed the captain back towards ops. I walked over to the desk and sat down, palming the office door closed. We took the other chairs in the room. "First, I'm putting commendations in both of your files for doing the right thing. I'm also going to flag you both as whistleblowers, so at least for the inquiry you'll have some level of immunity. I won't do anything to you, but Senator McConnell and his little toady downstairs might try something." Marcia nodded. "You know him?" I asked her. Marcia gave a snort. "More than I like to." "Well, said the captain. Now you know who you're dealing with, too, Jack. I sighed. Yeah, explains a lot. Captain continued. As for your hacker, there's no doubt she's going to be called for the inquiry to testify, but I'm going to assign her to your night shift for now, Jack. That way she'll be out of sight of Morgan's staff during the day. I can keep Morgan under wraps for a little while, but I can't stop him doing anything to her after she leaves station. Luckily, we're going to be calling in a survey ship. If we can get them to grant her asylum, there's not much Unity can do about it. Better if she can get survey citizenship. Not sure exactly how that works, but if she had it, Unity can't even compel her to testify if she doesn't want to. The treaty with Survey is pretty specific when it comes to extradition. I'm going to bet that Survey will be here well before the carrier. Once it's here, have her talk to Lucifer, the ship's AI, immediately. From what I've heard, they're the real decision makers and are the ones who grant asylum or citizenship. I knew Survey was an independent nation, but I hadn't realized that it was the AIs of the ship that granted citizenship. Everyone knew that getting onto a Survey ship as a citizen outside of marriage was nearly impossible, but it wasn't really known why. The ship has to grant her asylum? The captain nodded. I talked about it with someone from Survey once. They don't really broadcast what the process is, it's just that it's extremely difficult. It keeps hordes of people looking for asylum, or people who may think they want adventure from bugging the ship mind to be let on. Marshall looked thoughtful. Not a bad idea. The captain continued. Jack, like I said, you'll need to be on duty full time now. I need you to send out the message to Lightbringer. Have the doctor give you a summary to send with it. Let me know when it's ready, and I'll add the Survey emergency codes. Yes, sir. The captain stood, and we stood with him. Thank you, they said quietly. Marshall looked at him for a moment, then said, Get the job done, Sam. The chaplain turned and left. I followed, feeling the captain's guilt like a wall behind me. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revgenapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.